Well, let's just get into it. How many people use AI on a regular basis in some form? Okay, so here's the real question here that I think we'll be diving into. How many feel more productive after having used it? Okay. How many times, sometimes you feel like you kind of went down a rat hole and you wish you hadn't gone down there? Okay, yeah, I think we all agree there. So I think that's a great way to start. And I've got the clicker here. So we've got the speakers here, but this is even better because now you can see, look at that, we even lined up properly. So we'll start it off with Ladi Astrab of innovative Incognito Software Systems. They're innovative too, but the name is Incognito. Then we'll move to Randy Van Buren, Motive, and Josh Angotti. Angadi. Okay, sorry, I never pronounced your name before. And of Unity. Unity is a service provider. But we'll let you guys give us a little thumbnail of what you guys do, what it's about. But why don't we first ask that same question, which I think it was that same question, was, how should operators look at AI when they're deploying it as something that's improving operational efficiency and customer service? Why don't you address, kind of give us a thumbnail, then we'll have a conversation, and of course we'll open it up to questions. So Ladi, why don't you start us off?
Sure, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you, Ken. And thank you for taking your guys' time out of the busy schedule and joining us here on the loft, which is not really a loft, it's sort of part of the loft. Maybe it's a virtual loft, I don't know. We'll go from there. So Incognito has been in business for 30 plus years in the broadband space. So we've seen the evolution of cable, fiber, AI, and the shift from not just pipe, but now user experience and a network operational efficiency and everything of that nature. Where I see things going is trying to predict what the customer is having before the customer knows it, right? Those are the kinds of things where I think AI can most certainly help and has helped in a lot of the cases. For instance, if let's say there's a trend of more devices. When I started with Wi-Fi, I think I had 3 devices on my network, 4. At last count, I was at 57. I don't even know where most of those things are. So it's a growing concern, especially from a user experience perspective, because as you add more devices, the degradation will go. So being able to predict that, I think that's going to be one of the key things that I think from a use case perspective is where operators will see. Is like, how can I know that this customer who's happy in 3 months is not going to be happy because their devices that they're adding on there. So those are kind of the use case, I think.
Excellent. So prediction. So Randy, what's your prediction? Talk to this, please.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Randy Van Buren with Motive Software Solutions, and we are a spin out, if you will, from Nokia. That was 2024. Motive was actually a company before that in 1997 that got acquired by Alcatel-Lucent, then to Nokia, and then spun back out here to be an independent one and have its own path forward, if you will. But some of the same situations, we've had some of this long history with device management, but from the Nokia perspective, we also bring in a lot of the network influence on the wireless side, how the experience can be from an overall view, both from your device endpoint and then the places all in between. So whether it's a cloud infrastructure or your access methodology, there's information about what's going on with customer experience all along that way, and how to correlate that information so they're not siloed data products is one of the areas that we take a look at closely. One of the experiences that we had with a trial to look at a more proactive use case is the look at a narrow set of folks who are the troublesome ones. So is there a way to say, hey, this category, those who have a propensity to call for problems with their devices, can we be more proactive so they're not just calling all the time, or whatever the channel may be, their chat channel, So how do you take that AI knowledge base, you have this data, then act efficiently on it to say, hey, these set of customers could have use cases applied to them. Maybe it's just a simple thing like you get told when you call in, how about have you tried to reboot your device? But automated AI, next best action, already determining that this troublesome set can be eliminated or reduced, and that can add up to millions of dollars just on the customer care side that they're not calling in and taking time. So there are use cases that, without even going into the more generative or the agentic AI, that are in place today just on basic AI knowledge base.
That's great. So just figuring out who the trouble problem are and children are, and then going after them. Josh, from an operator's viewpoint.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ken. Josh Angadi from Unity. Previously, we were Windstream. Folks might be more familiar with that, the Kinetic business. And I think Ladi nailed it in terms of kind of anticipating sort of what are our customers experiencing, what will they be experiencing, and trying to get ahead of that to make sure that we're guaranteeing a service that they're paying for. And I think in terms of the customer experience, end to end, we're thinking about that quite a bit as well as service providers. My team in particular, I'm responsible for product across all three businesses, which are wholesale, Kinetic business, and Kinetic consumer. And I also lead a software engineering team that is focused on kind of along the lines of what you were saying, Ladi, which is automating the tools and the operations within our broadband network. So building out functionality that anticipates when that customer is going to have a negative experience, getting ahead of it, repairing it, and then making further predictions as time goes by. So that's where I see it headed. I'll talk more about that as we get into the questions, but thanks for having me, Ken.
No, that's excellent, because I heard silos, and it sounds like you are the bridge between those silos in your company. But we'll start with a question. Ladi, you can start, and others can join in. But the whole idea, and this is maybe self-serving, the user services platform, TR369, where do you see the synergy with AI?
I think it's fortuitous that USP came out when it came out, and AI is as hot as it is. Because for those of you who are not familiar with the USP or TR369, it is near real-time telemetry that the device has. And for AI to work properly, you need near real-time experience. So minimal delay, you don't want any latency or any of that, because 15 minutes ago, guess what? That user is not in that room anymore, or that user is somewhere else. So you need that information right when I need it, right time. I think even car manufacturing, right place, right time, right part in order to have it so you don't slow down. So it's very similar to that kind of experience. So having a standards body that identifies that and sees that, we have seen a very large uptake in the USP protocol, because customers, when I say customers, I'm talking broadband providers, see the value in near real-time visibility for it, because then they can make proper decisions. And AI makes only decisions on information that it has, and so low latency and getting that data right away is key and critical for making an accurate prediction.
And I think from a provider's point of view, that secure, standards-based, device-agnostic kind of approach that's exactly what AI needs in order to kind of build and learn. I mean, it just devours data, and the way that these methods devour it is in that format. And I think that's where that sort of platform in TR369 really comes into play for us.
So, Randy, any comments on that, or?
I'll add a flavor, I guess, to this. It's all good. The idea being that it's a user experience with a USP, and you kind of think about your in-home or in-business edge and boundary to that. There's a lot of content flowing across that boundary, but you don't want to have to necessarily wait. We talked about the latency for responses to that, and that's to the point that USP lends itself well to the edge AI. So the idea that you can actually stay closer to where the user experience is itself in terms of response and interactions, maybe even at the device itself.
Well, and speaking of device, I'll ask you this question and let everyone, because I think it leads right into that, and the whole idea of the internal device that's on the data. I mean, you have various domains. It could be Wi-Fi offload, CBRS. It could be an MNO type thing, or an MVNO. how do you kind of bring all those things together and do something intelligent with it?
I think that's back to me, right? So yeah, I was making eye contact. So that's the breadth that we're seeing now from a lot of operators is this multi-domain, multi-access, satellite connectivity, and mergers and acquisitions are taking place here. And so the user experience is not just a symmetrical serial fashion anymore. It's asymmetric from all sorts of angles and vectors, if you want to think of in some technology terms. So how to bring that in a consolidated and correlated way of knowledge base that does require some what I would call device behavior understanding and interactions of the different types of devices that are taking place across those networks. So that visibility is left in these domains often, and so you have these data product silos. Oh, this is the wireless domain, this is the fixed domain, this is my core domain, but that's going to have to merge together as well, these converged core concepts as well as converged devices.
It sounds like even converged businesses based on what you were talking about, Josh.
Yeah, I will say, like, the challenge that we have with the experience Randy's talking about is that canonical KPI standard, being able to handle all of that data in a standardized way. And that's, so the way that we're approaching that for the most part is on a use case by use case basis. Like, that seems to be, at least in my experience, the most effective way to take on that kind of effort.
Yeah, I concur with what they're saying. Standards, if everybody speaks the same language, there is no translation needed. And if there's no translation needed, we all still have most of the understanding, but we're closer to understanding what needs to be done. I'll give you an example. My daughter is saying, my Wi-Fi is down. I'm not having a good Wi-Fi experience. But the problem wasn't with the Wi-Fi itself. It was with the Ethernet route. There was a fiber cut down the road, and that was the problem. But from a user perspective, they don't care whether it's fiber, satellite. As long as I can get my YouTube, whatever flavor of the month it is, as long as I can get that experience and get it faster. I remember sitting in the Saturday mornings watching cartoons. Those days are gone. Those days are gone. It's now on my iPad, on my iPhone, on my watch. You got, that's the experience that we're seeing, and we need to adapt to that.
From a phased approach, and we can come back to the data part because obviously that's an important part. But Josh, as you're looking at deploying this, how do you guys deploy it? Is it in phases? You're a huge network here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the way that we generally think about it, is in that phased approach. And we think about it first in kind of laying the foundation. And a lot of folks in this audience have had experience with this, starting off with the data quality and the tools and the tool access. All of that kind of lays a foundation upon which you build. And then we introduce rules-based automation. And in some cases, rules-based automation is enough. Like, you can stop there if it's a contained data set. I think most of the folks in this audience probably are working in broadband networks and realize that that is not a contained data set. And that is a data set that's growing and evolving constantly, especially with more edge computing that's occurring per Randy's earlier comment. That data that is available to us is just growing and growing. So the next step to move beyond that sort of limited rules-based environment is to introduce kind of predictive analytics. And that's one of the areas that we're working now, is kind of leveraging that predictive analytics into prescriptive actions. And that's where you start to introduce some of your agentic AI efforts. And then from there is it kind of this continuous learning experience. And I'll talk briefly about kind of some of the ways that we've done that. We've been working on an in-house home-built data analytics platform that evaluates the health signatures of our broadband network. We are now feeding that payload into a licensed generative AI client. The folks that preceded me at Windstream had a lot of foresight, and they licensed a Gen AI client, and they have democratized it across the company, which has gone a long way. And we feed that payload into that generative AI engine, so now it becomes accessible by our care and repair representatives or our frontline technicians. So the next step for us, moving beyond just the generative AI space, is that same IT group, which I can't say enough good things about, had the foresight to start building AI agents within a framework. And we've now started to leverage a repair representative agent. So our repair representatives are able to communicate via that generative AI interface into that repair AI agent, and not only query it and interrogate it for information about the customer's experience, but actually start to take action. And the agent will recommend actions, and it will trigger actions. So again, all sort of phased how we approached it. When I joined the team, they had a fantastic foundation with that analytics platform that they built. They've continued to add health signatures to it to make it more robust. And now we've started to leverage the AI ecosystem that our IT organization has introduced and democratized to all of us.
And it sounds like that's the human's still in the loop at this point. Is that one?
Absolutely. So right now, and I think that's part of the governance, which we may touch on a bit, is as these AI technologies are introduced, it's so important that we kind of introduce them with bound automation and make that also auditable. So that's the process we're going through right now, is kind of bounded automation and auditable automation, such that the repair representatives, the human in the loop, can validate the functions. And then, we start to move towards what we've all been talking about, which is agent-to-agent comms. And eventually we start to kind of gradually pull that human out of the loop and allow those agents to take action once we've validated the functionality and confirmed the outcome.
Excellent. This kind of ties into something I think, Ladi, you had, the idea of, what are the limitations? Is it something, limitations change over time? Why don't you talk to that?
I actually do want to congratulate you on doing that, because too many times we see AI is a problem and they just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And that's a problem, because going down the agentic route, being specific about what needs to be done, and then getting the agents to talk to the agents within there, that is the right move. That is the right way to do it. So I applaud you guys for heading down that road, because we see too many people just say, AI is going to fix the problem, throw it at the wall, and let's see what sticks. And chances are there's only a few percentages that actually, kind of stick to that. So having baby steps, let's not boil the ocean, let's just boil a pot at a time. I know it's going to take a long time, but let's not try boil the whole ocean, and just, kind of steps at that. And I'm sorry, I forgot what the question was.
That was just such a great response. All I can think of is the new AI, spaghetti AI, where you throw it on the wall and see what sticks. But we're not doing that. We're doing precision AI.
Exactly.
But I mean, it was maybe you kind of addressed it in one sense, but the limitations. What are the limitations today? I think like privacy, which Josh addressed. But what else?
I think privacy is a big one, right? That's why you don't take your corporate stuff to ChatGPT. You keep it as local as possible, because privacy is a big concern, and it's a big factor. I think that's going to be the limitations. The ability and what the device or what AI can do, that's limitless. We just throw a GPU or whatever CPU cycles at it, it'll get it done. I think that's the limitation, is our privacy. And we, as people, I think I was talking to Randy about this, we're smart enough to invent AI, but we're dumb enough not to know how to use it, right?
Yeah.
So, that's where we're at.
I thought of something I'd like to add as well. In terms of limitations, often we hear about stories of hallucinations from some AI, but I'll go a little different route here in terms of truthfulness or trustworthiness of the information that goes into it. And I think it goes to Josh's perspective here, that it's only necessarily as good as the information you're kind of putting into it. So if you are throwing it in a general generative AI, where is it going to get its source data from? So that's data source, that data truth, that data set, that, and then how to generate an appropriate data set that's large enough for the model to work from. So that's part of an area that we work on as well in our company, is to anonymize a lot of that information so it's private, but to help that it's an accurate set of data that you're working from, not from just a global operator perspective, but one that applies directly to your situation.
Well, and we talked about the user services platform, but it seems like, especially with some of the APIs and the interfaces that the Broadband Forum, exposes, it seems like there's an opportunity from within the network to take that data as well. And so tell us about how you guys envision that. How do you kind of bring all this together into something that's coherent?
I'll take that one as well.
Yeah, go ahead, you can start.
The traditional way was data lake. Just dump it, right? And then someone else has to make sense of it. But the domain expertise, the knowledge, the data scientists, how to pull that together and transform it. The old school way of extract, transform, load, it just doesn't work well in terms of an AI set of use cases. So what are the ways that then you gain efficiency from what we would call data products that are created from different domains, is what we're after, to try to say these are the attributes, these are the characterizations, the behaviors, and then what applies to a human knowledge that's going to be interactive in that case, but then what applies to an AI knowledge base. So there is, I guess, another viewpoint that brings to bear that way, that it's expertise that has to be built up, and there's still human people that need to create that. So if you ask AI to do that data sifting for you, it won't be accurate, right? So this is an important data scientist role, data architecture, data meshing is some of the terms I've heard as well that come to mind. And I'll let others expand.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to expand on what you said. Data lake, but there's an ocean, right? So you have, it's more than a lake now, it's an ocean, right? It is there. But if you have the agent and specific AI doing what they're supposed to, and you link them in, that's where I think the power of AI is going to become a little bit more relevant and a little bit more. I mean, I'll give you an example. I asked ChatGPT, everybody thinks ChatGPT is AI. Well, it's one form of AI, it's there. I just bought a new trailer. I'll give you an example. I bought a new trailer. It was 3,500 pounds to tow. I've got a Tesla, and I know that on there, if I go in tow mode, I go, hey, ChatGPT, how do I get in tow mode for it? And it came back and gave me step by step I was convinced. I was completely convinced that that's what it was. But a little birdie in me, my gut feel said, validate and check. And so I validated and checked. It turns out it wasn't just the menu system that went down. I had to buy a $17 piece of adapter that I wired into the vehicle, and I had to buy an electronic brake system. ChatGPT didn't tell me that. I would have bought it, assumed, and gone down the road, and now I'm a hazard to everybody. I'm a hazard without the trailer, but now I'd be more of a hazard to it. But to your point, people we need to validate and we need to check. ChatGPT was very apologetic. I said, this is incorrect information, you need this. And it came back and said, you are correct. Here's the wiring diagram.
So Josh, does your GPT tell you how smart you are when it's when you tell it you're wrong?
I think that in this thinking about this question in this topic, this is where this sort of very nebulous concept of governance comes in. And I think that everybody talks about governance, and admittedly, I've been in quite a few AI talks, and admittedly, each time someone would bring it up, I would just glaze over. I'm like, all right, governance, I don't really understand. And then once we started to move into this use case that I explained a moment ago, that's when it kind of hit me. What is governance here? What is applicable governance in this situation? And what I proposed initially was, hey, I can come up with prompt library. I can work on a prompt library to help our care representatives, our repair representatives, our field technicians, so that they can ask the right questions or ask the question that's going to yield the desired result for them to be effective in their role. I suggested that as an option, and we said, we kind of came to agreement that that might be a good first step, and then we could start to validate the output of that generative AI interaction. And then we started to think, all right, well, how does a care representative want to receive this information? I mean, bear in mind, they're on the phone with oftentimes a frustrated customer. How do we want to deliver this to them in a way that it's, one, consumable, and two, effective for them to answer questions and address issues? And the way that it initially came out was, it was like this 3-page long explanation of what's going on with that customer account. And I was like, we can't give that to a care representative. We need to flip this. What we need to do is condense the summary of the information, and we need to deliver a step-by-step action for them. So, because that's what they want to read first. They want to know, what are the steps that I need to take this customer through, because their interest is just like all of our interests, and that is get that customer online, solve that customer's problem as quickly as possible. So that's how we started to approach governance, and I think that's gone a long way for us.
Have you seen any reduction in customer, call times and things like that, and what kind of metrics?
That's exactly what we're measuring right now. We're very early in that process. We have seen a very significant impact in our technician experience, because our field technicians are using a mobile tool now that is hitting that generative AI client and pulling information directly from the payload that my team is delivering. So we have seen substantial reduction in frustration from our technicians because they're able to solve the problem faster. I think we often forget, like, we talk about all of this in numbers. We talk about mean time to repair, we talk about call duration, we talk about all of this in numbers, and we forget the fact that the human that represents our companies wants to solve that problem as quickly as possible for the customer on the other end. They don't want to be on that phone, they don't want to be in that home any longer than they have to be. So we've started to try to think more like that.
And Randy, I see you're shaking your head. I just wanted to throw in the multimodal, or not multimodal, but you've got text, you have phones. How does all that come together?
Multi-channel, perhaps interactions like that, omni-channel, and that context that goes with it. That's a good perspective to bring to bear. The idea being that you interacted through one to start with a phone call, and then how does that switch later as a follow-up, or a technician came in on their own channel. So that consistency of information, the contextual information gets carried over. But I'll also add sort of this view of, is there a Socratic method to it? Because you spend time just trying to make sure you know exactly what the problem is. Otherwise, you're fixing the wrong thing, right? And so things get skipped. As an example, Ladi was also saying, right, that there's steps in between. And so this context, this information, even though it's still there, you don't want to have to start over, but you want it also to be, have we narrowed it down to the right specific thing, and so we're not repeating the same steps. Yes, I've done that already. I do it again, and I'm still having this issue.
I love that. Remember me once, not 5 times.
Correct. Thank you.
So I actually want to, something that I was taught early in my career. When a customer calls in, they have a technical problem. You may fix the problem, but you don't fix the whole problem. You got just by fixing the technical problem, you don't necessarily fix the customer problem. And each customer has a different matrix and different thresholds of their frustration, right? If I'm calling, we've got a more serious problem than my grandpa calling, right? So that's going to be hard to put a number on and ascertain, and I think AI is going to, that's where the human factor comes in. You need to be able to fix that in, because at the end of the day, it's all about loyalty as well, right? So if I can fix the customer as well, not just the technical problem, that customer is going to be with me for a long time.
Well, you just triggered a thought, and this is totally out from left field, but that's what you expect from me. So are any of you guys looking at the idea of sensing emotion, in the call, the language that's being used, so forth, to then react that way, in the appropriate way?
Yeah, in fact, I think there was some mention of this in a talk yesterday, if some got to attend, but the idea there's interactive behavior. The device can, if it's, we think of just, hey, Wi-Fi interaction with our in-home devices, but there's other ways you can sense what's going on, And
when it's thrown across the room.
but there can be a visual and biometric as well as, let's just say, mood type interaction. So if you are in a chat session or your phone call, there's the sound of your voice and the words that you're using and the tone that comes across. So yeah, there is this qualitative information besides just the nuggets you're trying to pull out as to the frustration level and the response to it. It's not just the robotic response, right? So how to have that, if it's working with an agentic AI, it's a more natural conversation type perspective that you want to engage in, and not just a repetitive one that just says, well, you're a dummy kind of thing. You make you feel bad. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys want to comment on that, or before I ask any more off the wall questions, how about off the audience questions? Anyone have any questions for our speakers? I can run down there with the microphone, but if not, let's keep going, and let's kind of look to the future a little bit in the terms of what other broadband use cases do you see being powered? I mean, we just talked about the emotion factor, but whoever wants to jump in first on that.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about the use cases that we're focused on right now, and I think there's also a lot in the kind of security opportunities. I mean, I don't want to minimize or trivialize the concerns around security and privacy, but I do think that there is significant opportunities in that space that have never existed before. So we're all constantly talking about and concerned about PII is a really good example, with data breaches and database exceptions and loss of PII and how do we minimize exposure. I think there's a big opportunity there if you think about what AI can do to detect and then redact PII from call logs, from transcripts, things like that. Or better yet, take it one step further. Randy, you mentioned biometrics. We could use voice biometrics as authentication, and then you don't even need to exchange the PII. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there in the call space. My focus, again, like I mentioned in the intro, is more in the network area. So of course, I'm very interested in things like where can AI support that layer 3 and layer 4 networking information. So things like routing behaviors and potentially protocol misuse without ever looking at a customer's payload, like never inspecting it, but being able to sense that there might be questionable activity going on here. And I think that's another example of just reducing exposure, and I think it's a really significant one.
And before you guys address that question, it just makes me think of some of the things that we will be doing at the innovation demonstrations next month in Paris. But the idea of having probes in the network to understand what the performance is at those spots, and then you can react, that sense, think, act, right? So you have to sense it first, I guess.
I mean, I'll take a stab of where I mean, I wrote a blog yesterday on my LinkedIn, and one of the things I said, who knew by us laying cable down in the ground and over there, we were actually planting seeds of technology throughout there? Who knew that Netflix, who was just a DVD exchange, all of a sudden uses the internet for that? Like, we are laying like the foundation for where it's going to go. Who knew that any of that ChatGPT was going to eventually come? I think there was some movies and everything else that kind of went there. But the point I'm trying to make is, we don't know where we're going to go, but we have to be careful where we're going to go. But I'm excited where we're going. I'm excited where we've been. And every day is a new day. And I think it's a dawning of a new era.
Yeah, I think it's funny, Ladi, I've had a couple of these. I love being on these talks. I like panel conversations about AI. I can barely contain myself. But I remember, like, it was probably the first time I ever saw an art exhibit like this, but I remember going to this really amazing Rembrandt exhibit, and it was the first time I had ever seen where they not only got the masterpieces, but they got a bunch of Rembrandt's character studies and all of the kind of prep work. And I remember standing at this one and kind of progressing through and then seeing the last character study before the masterpiece. And then I backed up and I looked at it and I thought, oh my God, that was lightning in a bottle right there. Like, that's when all the creativity was contained in one space, and it's just before the masterpiece came. And I thought, like, that seemed like such an apropos comparison to where we are right now. I don't know if we're on the last character study. I'm pretty sure we're not at the first. But there will be many, many masterpieces. Just like there always was in any artistic movement, there were many masterpieces, and there will be many of those kind of lightning in a bottle creative moments where that last character study completes and you're just before you pour all that creativity out onto a canvas. And it feels like that's like we're in that continuum somewhere right now. And that's what's so exciting.
Well, we're doing somebody's history, right? That's what we're doing, right? We are making somebody's history. That's essentially what we're doing.
Just to add on the broadband side, the thought that popped in my head is that we think about, oh, this is all this traffic that can accommodate back and forth and transactional type information. But the broadband also extends to the device itself. And so what is that device now, the smartness, if you will, of that, the intelligence that's right there, that there's things that can transact directly with the user, and that's part of that USP. And so I'm going to throw this out again, that edge AI, you're moving that edge closer. The device could be a handheld device, or it could be a router or a home hub or a smart TV. But these are the interactive. That's the domain within a home. But then the enterprise could also have its own experience. But so that broadband experience is also just local. Is what I'm trying to get to. Is that it's a very personal experience that you're having, and that privacy can stay within that local area. That interaction and that response that you're looking for in terms of the device diagnose itself. Is there a way to figure out an understanding of what it sees back to the network and explain that to the user? So there's interesting things that you don't have to go back to a cloud for, which the nice broadband pipes are great for, but you can just do broadband within your own locality.
Self-healing device. I love it. I love it.
Well, yeah, I guess there's a whole class of neural processing, NPSs, I guess, right, that they're, I think, on these devices, right? So it's starting to allow that localization.
Happening already, yes.
I was just going to say, you brought out a device where 15, 20 years ago, it's more powerful than it is, it's just, I love technology.
Well, and that, the other day, the Wall Street Journal, slipping back 25 years, fiber bubble, all that stuff, it turned out okay, right? I mean, fiber was the right thing, but it was, there was clearly a bubble, and now people are suggesting that may be with AI, but I have to wonder from an operator perspective, does it really affect them, because are they the beneficiaries of this? What are the thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of it being, potentially a bubble, is that the question? I mean,
yeah, and what would the impact be on our industry?
Yeah, look, I think there's people who are talking about it being a bubble. I think very much are focused on just like the frontier algorithms. Like that's the frontier models, because maybe they're slowing a little bit from where they were day one. But I don't know that that's particularly relevant to us as a group. We're thinking about application, and those frontier models right now are way beyond what we can take advantage of. So right now we're spending day in and day out thinking about, okay, practically speaking, how do I take this technology and use it? So even if things slow down in frontier models, what you're already starting to see is like application popping up every few days, whether it's Nano Banana or whether it's some other, whether it's Gemini Flash 2.5 with the video production. Like it's starting to get applied in really wonderful ways that we're using, even if the frontier models are slowing down a little bit. I think we've got a long way to go in this industry. I think we've got a long way to go in practically every other industry to start to really harness this technology and apply it the way we want to.
That's a great response. I was thinking along those lines, but I could have never said that articulately. So unfortunately, we have an idea. But it does bring to the idea of, and we kind of touched upon this a little bit, about the whole idea of are there opportunities to bring in other data sets? And, in addition to what you have on the network, maybe it's weather, maybe it's vibrations from the earth, whatever it might be, to then do new things that couldn't be done before. Any thoughts on that? And that might be close to our final. Yeah.
I think that's great telemetry you're bringing in there, because there's so much, like for instance, one of the telemetries that I find that our operators in certain countries, temperature, device temperature goes up, aggregation. That never used to be a high importance, but you bring up a good point, the weather, we got a storm coming in. And we can prepare ourselves a little bit better. We can use AI to maybe reroute some routes and some things of that nature. So bringing all of that in to make better decisions, absolutely. I think that's a good point.
Maybe even the magnetic shift that could occur from pole to pole. It's a global phenomenon, right? That there could be electronic effects based on that. It's an impact, yes.
What's your take?
I love the weather that you brought up, the concept of how weather has such a significant impact on our infrastructure. There is the leader of our technical operations team at Unity. He often says that his best technician is sun and wind. When it comes to a copper network, sun and wind goes a long way.
One of the thoughts, I've been following the Fiber Optics Association for several years, and they're just fascinated with the things they can detect because of the signature of, you put a laser down there, you get a regular backscatter, it basically bounces back and you have a signature. It's pure AI, and suddenly you can detect vibrations, so landslides, earthquakes, and so forth. But the other day, I was thinking, well, could you do a predictive backhoe thing? So you have an idea that, hey, there's some shaking here that shouldn't be there, and you go out there. Anyway, that was my kind of
The thought. No, I mean you can prevent a backhoe from cutting fiber.
at least if you know where it's happening, right? You can have it. And then I think there's that's some of the exciting stuff. We have a lot of opportunities before us. So if you guys have any comments, closing, we have about 20 seconds each, or 15 seconds now.
I would just say I appreciate the opportunity to have these conversations and to get a chance to speak with the audience members afterwards. I think this goes such a long way in helping us develop use cases in our minds that ultimately become the practical use cases that we have.
I think it was kind of summarized a little bit as well, but phases, steps, learning, growing, this, the way we interact and understand AI and how it understands us. So it's going to continue to grow and change, and maybe we'll get more comfortable. But right now, there's still a lot of hope, right? A lot of hype, but it'll come.
I think the biggest closing thought I would have to say is let's keep the conversation going. Let's not stop talking. Let's share. And let's share our knowledge. Let's share your experience, our experience.
Excellent. Way to end it, because we will be sharing this conversation or continuing the conversation in Paris in a couple of weeks. A few of us will be there. So please, if you have an opportunity, join us there in Paris Network X. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you, panelists, very much. Big hand for you.